Hi, my name is April.
And my name is Regine.
And welcome to
A&R Channel!
And today, we're gonna give you some information about Django and Flask Python. What is Flask? Flask is a lightweight web development micro-framework for Python and based on WorkSoup WSGI toolkit and Django template engine. Micro-framework basically means that Flask aims to keep the core simple but extensible, enabling you to build your own cool web app in a short amount of time. So guys, WorkSoup is a WSGI utility library for Python. It is simple to use, yet one of the most advanced and powerful WSGI utility modules. Also, it receives requests from client, passes it to application, and sends to response provided by application back to the client. Like what I've said, Flask is very extensible and keeps the core simple because it has the Flask admin, Flask cache, Flask open ID, Flask mail, Flask Mama Alchemy, Flask Restless, Flask SQL Alchemy, Flask testing, Flask WTF, and Flask uploads. In 2004, POCO was formed as an international group of Python enthusiasts. Flask was created by Armiro Nature of POCO. The advantages of Flask, based on the concept of minimalism, comes with a browser-based debugger, no ORM in the delivery.
A simple hello world tutorial. So I have a Flask tutorial directory in my computer, and I'm just gonna edit. I just call it week 13. You can call it whatever. And I'm just gonna cheat here and just gonna paste in the hello world thing. So just go like that. Boom. Control C. Just gonna paste it in. And okay. So let me first run it just to make sure it runs, and then I'll explain what's going on. So to run it, all you have to run is Python week13.py, just the name of the script. And when I hit enter, if it runs, it'll say running on blah 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 blah. So this is a IP. This is a IP address that's local to my computer. So if I copy this into my browser on my computer, I think I have this pulled up. In my browser, it'll just say hello world. So if I reload it, it'll say hello world. So this means it's actually working. So what just happened here? What happened was that this amount of Flask code, this is just importing something, right? It's just boilerplate. This is the main function here, app run, just keep this. So this function defines a function hello. You can really call this any function you want. And this just returns hello world to like the requester. And this weird ampersand thingy is called a route. So this says that if someone requests /, if someone goes to your web server and goes to first /, which is like no, you don't put anything after it, then run this function. Then simply run this function and return whatever you want to the user. So it just returns hello world. So if I go here, when I visit the website, / is the like address, right? So you usually don't have to say /. So / means I just visit it, no HTML, no anything, and it returns hello world. So this simply just does a, if you look at the network, when I load, it simply does a GET request of the /, and the response is just a string hello world. That's it, just a string hello world. And if you look at it, it's fairly straightforward. It just returns a string you want. And the nice thing about this is that you don't need to print the HTTP headers or anything, right? Remember, like if you're printing this with CGI, you have to print content type, whatever, new line, whatever. So the one nice thing about a web framework like Flask is that it encapsulates that for you. So the semantics behind this is whatever you return out of the function is what the user gets. No extra kind of crap. There's a special mode in Flask which is called debug equals true. I'll put all this code online later. Actually, it's already online now. But if you run debug equals true, the cool thing is that when it runs the server, it automatically detects if you change the file. So if you change the file, it actually reloads the server. So it's like you're always getting the latest version. Because remember, this code is on your server, and you actually have to restart the server every time you change your code, because the server is just running with whatever copy you had originally. So the nice thing about this is that when you change the code, so let's say I have hello world here, and if I say this to goodbye world and I save the file, as soon as I save the file, this thing says detected change in week 13 py reloading, restarted reloader. That's really nice, because then your thing just reloads. I don't think it works for everything, but for most scripts it works. So, but if you really want to be paranoid, you should kill it and then restart it, because the server-side code has to be reloaded every time. So if I go reload, it says goodbye world now, has my new version. So already you can see that using a framework like Flask gives you a bit of more flexibility, because you don't need to write all the headers and everything. So the next thing it gives you that's really nice is these nice URL strings. Remember, a big question earlier was, how do we get URLs to not be all ugly? Because right now what we have to do is we have to pass in like blah.py, question mark, name equals Alice, and age equals 21 or whatever, right? You have to pass in all these crazy things to URL, because so far in our basic CGI scripts, the URL has to be the file name of the script that you're loading. It has to be the file name of the script. So then you end up with something really ugly, right? Like your CGI bin blah, whatever, right? Or your login script is like this. And it looks super ugly. What you really want is just someone to visit something like blah, 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 login slash, or home slash, or something like really clean and nice. You don't want it to have to like have your whole file name in there. So in a traditional CGI scheme, there's not really a good way to do that without some like crazy twiddling around, because in CGI, all your stuff is just a file. They're just running files directly. But another really nice thing that web application frameworks provide for you is called routing, or URL redirection. So for example, if I just, in this route, if I say, I will say a thing called user, let's just say user, okay? And then we'll say, hello, user, like that. Okay, so does this reload? Let's make sure it auto reloads. Oh, wow, it died. View function, oh, I named this function the same thing. So the annoying thing is you have to name functions in Python, but you can't have duplicate names, obviously. So I just have to call this user as a name function. Okay, I'm restarting it. And now if I visit the original, I say goodbye world. Now, lo and behold, if I just say user right here, I just type in user, it actually goes to that function and executes it. So this is like astounding, because you can't really do this to CGI, right? This actually is not loading a file called user in a script or whatever. This is actually just going to my function called user. To be clear, this is the route. So the function name has nothing to do with it. So ignore this. I can call this whatever, right? I can call this something useless. Did this die again? No. The important thing is not the function name, is this magical thing up here called app.route. And I just said, if you visit the website /user.string, the web application framework knows to take that URL and then pass it to this function, so that it runs this function that says hello user. So now you can start seeing how it's starting to be more powerful, because you don't need to actually have multiple scripts, right? You can actually have URLs be as nice and clean as you want them to be. So this is something that you can't obviously get with CGI. Potential downside of this is that maybe a bit harder to debug, because you don't actually know what's going on behind the scenes. So the plumbing underneath in the framework is taking care of rewriting all the URLs for you. Yep, John.
So what is the plumbing? Like, what is happening when you...
That's a great question. That's a great question. And the answer is I have no clue, because that's the whole thing about web application frameworks. The answer is I have no clue. And also, if you don't understand Python, if you don't know Python really well, this line is like magical. It's like, what the heck is this thing? And if I spell it wrong, it will like destroy myself and it will break. So this is part of the fragility of using a framework. Is one, is that there seems to be this magical line here that if you don't understand Python, you don't understand. You just copy and paste and say that. And the other one is you don't actually know what's going on behind the scenes. I suspect what's going on behind the scenes is that Flask is a framework that actually sets up a web server for you. And if it sets up a web server, then it grabs the request URLs. It grabs the URLs of all the requests coming to the server, because it's its own server. So if it owns the server, it can grab the URLs and parse it and grab all the components. And then I'm sure the URL is just a big string, and it parses off, it chops off the domain name, and it chops off this part right after it, and then it passes that into a function that tries to go and match up with one of these things. And once it matches up, it jumps into that function. So I think that's basically what happens. So if you actually pass in an invalid thing like blah, blah, it'll say not found. So the web framework tries to get that string and tries to pass it in any function. If it doesn't, it'll explode and say not found. Yep.
Can you try something? Oh no. Well, I thought you said debugging on, right?
Yeah. I think the not found is that's just a debugging message. So the debugging on is useful if you have a error in your Python code. It'll print out like what your problem is in Python code. Let's see if it actually works. Let's put an error in the Python code. Let's say x equals 1 divided by 0. So this should throw an exception. Yep, perfect. So it's actually really nice. So another nice thing is if you have debug on, it will if you're running your Python. Because remember how like if you don't have debug on, it just says 500 error and it's really annoying, right? And you can't know what's going on. The nice thing is here, if the debugging is on, it will actually give you a nice printout. It says, is there a division error? It looks like the stack trace of the error. So you kind of know, oh, wow, I have a division error on this line. And you comment it out and reload, and it's good.
Guys, welcome back. So the first thing we need to do is we need to set up our directory structure of where our project's going to live. I'm going to put it in the projects directory of my C drive. And you can see I already have a folder created there. So let's go ahead and make the actual directory that this thing's going to sit in. So we're going to say make directory. And we'll just call this, this is going to be like a movie site. So I'm just going to kind of go with the typical feel that I have from other tutorial technologies that I use. So we're going to kind of build a basic movie website. So we'll say make dir movie, I'll just call it Flask movie. Alright, so let's go ahead and go into that directory. Now, we need to use virtual environment, and that comes with Python 3.5, and it's really important because we want to be able to isolate our development environment for each project that we're working on. So if you're using Windows, all you have to do is just say virtual env, and then I give it the name env as like an environment. Just that's what I call my environment. So this is going to go through. It's going to install some basic things that your environment needs, which is like pip, which is a common installer that we use to install Python pip files and wheel files, and makes things a lot easier for us. Now that this environment has been set up for us, though, we need to actually enter into it. So that's what we're going to do now. And I didn't mean to do that. I need to go back into that directory. So we're going to go into the environment directory that was created for us. You know what? I'm going to make this editor just a little bit bigger so you guys can see it. All right, so we're inside the environment directory there, and now we need to go inside the scripts directory. And in here, you're going to notice that we have this activate, and that's actually what we need to run in order to start our environment. And now you can see on the left-hand side inside these parentheses, we have env, which is the name of the environment that we created. So that lets us know that any sort of Python library that we need to use, Flask included, because really that's just a Python library, that's going to be put inside inside that folder, or inside of this virtual environment. So now, that being said, make sure you have Python installed. So if we type Python, you should be able to see that Python went ahead and it went into the Python editor, or the Python interpreter, I'm sorry. So we're going to run the install command, the pip install Flask. And this will automatically detect the version of Flask that we should be using with our Python installation. And right now it's being flagged by my antivirus, which is kind of annoying. But it'll go through in just a second. So now everything should be installed correctly. And that'll be installed just to that environment, so that way Flask is not shared with any other projects that you may have. And to make sure that's working, let's go ahead and pull up our Python interpreter. And we're going to try to import Flask. So we'll say from Flask import, and make sure it's a capital F for the import, and then say Flask. And if you get no error message there, that means that it's actually working inside of your virtual environment. And if you want to exit out of it, press Control C and enter, and you'll exit. All right, let's go ahead and add some directories that we're going to need, that every project needs. And any sort of web application you have, you should always have a folder for your templates, and then you should have another folder for your static content. And when I mean static content, I mean like CSS, JS files like JavaScript, or image files. So let's go ahead and create those folders now. We're going to create a folder called static, and then we're going to create another one called templates. And now I want to go into the static folder that we just created, and we're going to create makedir CSS, makedir JS, and then we're going to do it again for images. So if we look, we now have 3 folders here: CSS, images, and JavaScript. And let's go back to the main project folder. And here we're going to go ahead and create our first minimal Flask application, just to make sure that everything's working. So this is where we're going to need to make use of our editor. With Visual Studio, I can just open a website, and sometimes I find it easier to do this, but I can just grab Flask Movie and just kind of open up the entire directory. Visual Studio also has the ability to be able to set up a Flask project if you like it that way, but the problem with that sometimes is that it adds folder structures and things for you that you may not be familiar with, and it doesn't kind of follow along with this tutorial series. So that's why I'm going to just simply edit the Python files inside of the editor, and then we'll just edit it inside the editor instead of creating the Python project. Actually, so Visual Studio, I'm going to go ahead and have this be a project. So this is dependent just on what type of editor you have. So if you do not have Visual Studio, you don't have to have a setup that looks like this. My particular editor is telling me when I create this Python project that I have all these tools that are installed. Like WorkZoog was something that Flask is built on top of. So those are all libraries that Flask installed with its markup, like this Jinja 2 that all came with it and everything. So that's just being helpful by telling me that it's there. But this Flask movie here, this is the root directory of the project. And what I mean by root directory is that, like, if I went over to my C drive and clicked on projects, the Flask movie here, this is the root directory. So that shows me that that's what I got here. So if I went ahead and just added a new Python file, so you just need to add a new file no matter how you do it, it doesn't matter. It needs to have the .py extension, obviously, for a Python file. And we're just going to call this app.py. Alright, and now any Flask application, you're going to have the actual Flask name imported. So we're going to say from Flask import Flask, just like we did with our interpreter earlier when we tested the installation. And now we're going to say app equals Flask. And then we need 2 underscores and then say name. And that gets passed in from the command line when we start it up. Now we're going to create an app.route. And now this, if you've ever done Django before, is you're just defining a route. So a / means root directory, so it means this will be like the home page. And we can call that like index. So you can call this whatever you want, but I'll just call it index. And we'll just say return hello Flask. Now we're going to say if name, and this has to be under 2 underscores on each side of it, equals, and then once again 2 underscores main. Then we'll say app.run. Now what this does is it says that if this app name, like app.py, is run directly, it's going to be assigned the value main. And it's saying if that is the case, so if you run that directly from the command line, the value will be main. And if it's main, go ahead and run the application. Now, if you were to import this application somewhere, typically the import code gets run, but main, the name of the main gets changed to whatever the imported app is called. So that therefore, like if this was imported, like if another script imports this file, it says import app, then it's not going to equal main anymore. The name will be changed and this code will not execute. So this is only going to execute from the command line if it's executed directly. That's what that means, and it's very confusing, by the way, I think, for newbies in Python. So now in order to go ahead and run this, we need to pull up our command prompt, and we should be able to say just python app.py. And now by default, Flask comes with a development server, so that way you can test your applications instead of having to actually deploy it to an actual web server. But it'll host it on that local host address with the 5000 port. So if we actually went to it, the root directory is going to be executed, and you can see we defined our root directory with this right here. So this is where we actually said root directory, fire this function, and this function just simply returned a string that said hello Flask. It's not even returning HTML or anything like that. So if we inspected it, you can see that this isn't anything but just text. But if we wanted it to be HTML, we could actually do that. We could just say h1 and I can even put like a inline style inside here, so I can say style equals color red. So obviously I'd have to actually, because it's a string that we're returning, I need to change that to a single quote so it doesn't match, or I could escape it. Either way, it doesn't matter, but single quote might be a little bit easier to visualize. So if we restart our server and we refresh this, you can see that it's actual HTML with the inline styles applied. Alright guys, so that's how we get up and running with Flask quickly. So we're going to go ahead and end this video here. We'll get into some more stuff in the next video. Alright, thanks for watching. Bye.
Django. Django is a free and open source web framework that written in Python, which follows the Model View Template or MVT architectural pattern. At its core, Django is a high-level MVC-style open source collection of libraries that written in Python, and one of the most popular server-side web frameworks out there. And its motto is "Don't repeat yourself." Like in Python, it's emphasized efficiency, allowing you to do as much as possible. In the history of Django was created in the fall of 2003 when the web programmers at the Lawrence Journal World newspaper, Adrian Holivati and Simon Willison, was began using to build applications, and it was publicly under a BSD license in July 2005. The framework was named after guitarist Django Reinhardt. And in June 2008, it was announced that a newly formed Django Software Foundation or DSF would maintain Django in the future. How to use Django. Django is for creating web applications, that is, software, normally backed by a database that includes some kinds of interactivity that operates through a browser. A framework provides a structure and common methods for making these kinds of software. Django can be used to create dynamic, high-security web applications. What Django can do. Django is a free and open source web application framework that's written in Python. Frameworks exist to save you from having to reinvent the wheel and to help alleviate some of the overhead when you're building a new site. Built with Django framework, and they are the Discuss, Bitbucket, Instagram, Mozilla Firefox, Pinterest, NASA, Onion, Mahalo, The Washington Post, and The Eventbrite.
So now that we got Django downloaded and installed, set up properly on our computer, what we can do now is we can create our very first Django project. So this is going to be the process that you go through anytime you want to create a new Django website, and that is this. Go ahead and navigate to wherever you want to create your Django project files, and I'm just going to stick mine on my desktop, why not, and type Django admin. So this is a tool that we got whenever we downloaded Django, and it allows us to do a bunch of cool things. And in this video, we're going to be using this to create the starter files. And these are just the core files that you have to include in every Django website. So the command for that is just start project. So that's what that does. Now the only other thing you need to type after this is you just need to give your project a name. And this is just the name of the directory. So usually this would be something like the New Boston if I was creating it for my website, or like hockey website or something like that. But for this tutorial series, I am just going to name it something super generic website. So there you go. Hit enter, and I'll show you guys what it did. So what that just did is it created this directory, website, and if I double click this, we can see that it made some files right in there. Now, I am going to talk to you guys about what all these files are, but I'm actually going to open up an IDE and do it because I think it'll be a little bit better. And I'm actually using JetBrains, or excuse me, well, yeah, JetBrains is the company that makes PyCharm, and this is the coolest IDE in the world. So if you guys want to use the same one, then you can, but you don't need to. You can actually just follow along with this tutorial using Notepad or Sublime or anything you want, and it's going to work fine. But if you want to follow along with me, then just go ahead and click open and navigate to wherever you just made it, and mine was in my desktop website. So hit OK. Alright, mate, so that's a little bit better. I like having all my files on the left hand side and then the content on the right, so I can show you guys both things at once. But this is JetBrains, and by the way, real quick, if you guys are using PyCharm, then what you can do is if you go to File, New Project, and click Django, then oh, sorry, I got whooping cough. Then you can just go ahead and give it a name, and it just does the exact same thing as we just did. But if you don't, then go ahead and use the command line, and boom, roasted, good to go. So the first thing I want to mention is this root directory, this one, aka this one that just got created, you can actually name that to whatever you want. The name doesn't really matter, it's just whatever you want to name it. It's just the container for all of the files inside. So, you know, it doesn't mean anything special to Django. However, the files inside here, their names are important. So we see that we have this directory right here, which is the same name as its root directory. So that's why I said you can rename this one, the parent one, if it gets a little bit confusing, but keep this one the same. So before we get to that, let's go ahead and talk about this file right here, manage.py. By the way, never edit this file. Never try to add anything to it. Don't delete it. Just kind of ignore it. All this is, this manage.py, it's a program that comes with Django that lets you do a bunch of cool stuff to your project. And it allows you to do things like access the database and create users for your website. And we'll learn how to use this later on. But again, this is not a file that we're ever going to want to touch or manage or edit or anything like that. So that's what that is. Now, if you guys are like, all right, well, where is the code that we're going to be working with? Well, we're going to be working with some of the files in this directory, and we're also going to be creating some other ones. So go ahead and expand this, and I'll talk to you guys about all of these. So the first one, this init.py, all this is a file that tells Python to view this directory as a Python package. Now, there's actually nothing inside here, and that's because you don't even need any code in there. Again, like I said, it just says, hey, Python, this isn't just a normal directory on your computer. This is actually a Python package, so, you know, just view it as one. Now, the settings.py file, what I was going to do before this tutorial is I was like, all right, I'm going to go through all the settings and explain each one by one. But then I was like, if I do that, then people are probably just going to be like, all right, going to bed now. Django sucks. This is boring. So instead of just trying to explain all of these settings, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually explain every single thing as we kind of need it and get to it. I think it'll be a lot better that way, and it'll make a lot more sense than rather just trying to pound everything into your brain. But real quick, this file is just the settings and configuration options for your website. So like the overall settings for your entire website. Just think of it like that. Now this next one, urls.py, These are the URL declarations. In other words, it's kind of like the table of contents for your website. That's how people always explain it. So what I mean by this is whenever you go to a website, and let me just, what do I have up here? All right. So whenever you go to a website, you type in, of course, the website's name and then some URL after it. So whenever I type account, it gives me my stream. Whenever I type forum, then it gives me the forum. Whenever I type videos or go to this URL, then it shows me all the videos. So again, this part of the URL tells my website how to behave or what it's supposed to do. Now, most of the time, you're going to give it a URL and it's going to return a web page. But sometimes it doesn't return a web page. Sometimes if you go to the URL like logout.php, then it actually just performs some functionality and logs the user out and doesn't just, give you a web page. So again, what this file is basically saying, okay, look at whatever URL the user requested and then perform some functionality. And there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the basic overview of it. Talk more about that later. And this last one, WSGI, this stands for Web Server Gateway Interface, and it's just a special type of web server, and we're going to learn about that a lot later. Don't even worry about it right now, but that's the basic overview of a core Django project. So again, every single website that you have is going to be composed of all of these files. And again, you never touch this one, and we're not going to be using this one a lot or this one, so it's actually a lot easier. So once we start getting into actually developing it, you guys are going to see exactly what these do, and it's going to make a lot more sense. But yeah, that's the overview of it. And just to leave you guys with something cool, whenever you install Django and set it up like this, it actually comes with a web server, and it's not a full featured web server like you would actually want to host a actual website with it, but it comes with like a little mini web server that you can use for development. So if you just want to boot it up and check out what our website looks like right now, then what you need to do is you need to navigate to wherever you created your project. So I'm already in my desktop. I want to go ahead and navigate to website and just type ls and make sure that you see this, your project's name and manage.py. That makes sure that you're in the correct location. And again, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using this manage tool to boot our web server. So let me just go ahead and clear out of this to make it a little bit prettier. Now in order to do this, type Python manage.py, and actually you don't even need that, manage.py. So this is a tool that we can use. It comes with a bunch of different features. What we're going to be doing is run server. So again, we're just going to start that little development server that came with Django, and it says dun dun dun. All right, so starting development server at HTTP 127.0.0.1 port 8000. So if you just open up any web browser right now, then you can go to this location and you should see this right there. So again, Django came with a test server, and right now we have a home page looking beautiful. And actually what I do is I actually bookmark this, so that's why I have it right there, and that way I just don't have to type in the URL all the time. And that's what I recommend doing since you're going to be going to this page a lot. But anyways, look at that, our very first Django website. But yeah, in the next tutorial we're going to be spicing this up, and it's going to be cool. So I'll see you then.